2008. A family's annual holiday gathering turns tragic. It coincides with the arrival of kids' all-time Christmas favorite, jolly old Saint Nick.
It was tradition for Santa to show up near the end of the party.
But instead of dolls, coloring books, and toy trucks, Santa Claus is parceling out mayhem and murder. Armed with semi-automatic pistols and a flamethrower, Kris Kringle unleashes holy hell.
Almost as soon as the gunfire begins, the house suddenly bursts into flames.
But just a few hours later, across town, another shooting leaves behind one more dead. There is an armed lunatic on the loose. Will he strike again? Winter 2008. 20 miles outside of Los Angeles lies the suburb of Covina, a quiet upper-middle-class community. It has a population of just under 50,000, plus a low crime rate.
It's December 24, 2008, and the close-knit Ortega family prepare for their decades-long tradition. That is, their annual Christmas Eve party.
The patriarch and matriarch of the family are Joseph, known as Papa Joe, and Alicia Ortega.
Joseph's parents are Mexican immigrants. He's the first in his family to be born in the United States. He's living the American dream and starts his own industrial painting business.
The couple lays down roots, buying their home in the Covina area in 1982. They raise 5 children, sons James and Charles, daughters Alicia, Sylvia, and Letitia.
At some point, both James and Charles work for their father. While Charles inherits the paint company when Joseph retires in 1998, James strikes out on his own and starts his own successful paint business.
Alicia and Sylvia juggle work and motherhood with 3 children each. Their younger sister Letitia is a stay-at-home mom with 2 of her own.
Joseph and Alicia are particularly fond of Christmas.
This year started off no different than the others.
Guests play Texas Hold'em in the living room. Then, just as the party is starting to wind down, the doorbell rings.
Joseph and Alicia's 8-year-old granddaughter, Katrina, rushes to the door and opens it. Her eyes widen and she squeals in excitement, seeing Santa Claus standing right there before her.
Suddenly, the man in the Santa suit pulls out 2 semi-automatic pistols and shoots Katrina in the face. He races into the living room and begins firing indiscriminately.
Panic strikes. They're screaming and shouting as partygoers try to escape the rampage. Some hide under furniture, run out the back door, and even jump from second-story windows.
In the commotion, Katrina is scooped up by her mother, Letitia Yuzapolsky, who manages to slip past the gunmen and escape through the front door. After climbing the fence, they find refuge in a neighbor's house. 911 calls immediately begin pouring in. Neighbors report shots fired. Then, an explosion. The Ortega home is on fire.
The police, SWAT, and the fire department arrive, but the house is already engulfed in flames. The firefighters are fighting flames 50 feet high.
It takes 80 firefighters an hour and a half to extinguish the blaze.
Due to how quickly the fire spread, investigators suspect arson was the cause, and that whoever said it may be trying to cover their tracks.
Even after the fire is out, the crime scene is wildly chaotic. Investigators turn to party guests and neighbors to help fill in the blanks.
All agree there were 25 people in the Ortega home when the shooting started, but the police can only account for 16 of them.
At this time, there is no sign of any of the Ortega immediate family. Only Letitia is accounted for. She's at the Los Angeles County Hospital with her daughter Katrina, shot in the face.
Surprisingly, Katrina's injuries are not life-threatening, and doctors expect her to make a full recovery.
SWAT officers at the scene order residents to stay in their homes while they search the neighborhood.
police start to hear conflicting stories from witnesses. Some say the shooter never made it out of the house. Others say he did.
But eventually, investigators come across a couple who was at the party before the rampage began. They see a suspicious Dodge Caliber speed away from the neighborhood with its lights off.
Now, police suspect there is an armed and dangerous lunatic on the loose, and they have no idea if he plans to strike again.
Now, police get word of another Christmas Eve shooting.
A few miles away in the city of Sylmar, Brad Pardo comes home from a Christmas party to find his door ajar.
When Brad walks inside, he is shocked to find his 45-year-old brother, Bruce, lying in the living room in a pool of blood.
Devastated, Brad calls 911. LAPD quickly arrives on the scene. They find a bullet hole in the ceiling and 2 9mm pistols, one on the floor and another in Bruce's lap. Police surmise he was shot at close range and that the gunman may have left the weapons behind, but they will have to wait for the coroner's report to tell them more.
Back in Covina, the smoke clears and the sun rises on Christmas morning. Crime scene investigators begin searching the ruins of the Ortega home.
The team enlists the help of cadaver dogs to assist in the search for the missing family members. By late morning, they are only able to locate 3 of them.
Police believe the 9 people that perished in the fire are Papa Joe and his wife Alicia, their sons James and Charles and their wives, their daughters Sylvia and Alicia's 17-year-old son Michael.
Medical investigators discover one similarity in the Sylmar and Covina Christmas Eve shootings. The killer in both used 9mm semi-automatic handguns.
The 2 shootings are looking more and more like they are connected.
Coming up, a secret from the past is exposed and leads to murder. Discover 16 of the 25 people at the party are accounted for, but 9 Ortega family members are missing. When police learn of another shooting across town where the same caliber of weapon is used, they fear the gunman is still on the loose and that the shootings are related. Police interview Brad Pardo. He believes his brother was murdered.
Brad continues to further describe his brother as upbeat, charismatic, easygoing. But he had become a bit depressed lately due to a recent belligerent divorce. They learn the name of his ex-wife is Sylvia Ortiz. Digging a little deeper, they discover her maiden name is Ortega.
Sylvia is one of Papa Joe and Alicia Ortega's daughters. She was there at her family's Christmas party. The divorce between Sylvia Ortega and Bruce Pardo is what links the Christmas Eve mass killing of her family and his shooting death.
Now that the Christmas Eve death toll stands at 10, the investigators ask themselves, was Bruce Pardo targeted because of his association to the Ortega family? If so, are there other victims out there still to be targeted?
Police head to the hospital to talk with Letitia, who has been at her daughter's bedside.
Do you have any idea who this might have been?
Yes.
She tells them that despite the oversized costume, beard, and wig, she thinks the shooter was her ex-brother-in-law, Bruce Pardo.
This startling revelation opens the door to many new questions for investigators, but first, they must confirm Letitia's hunch.
Detectives find Bruce's car keys in his brother's house. After canvassing the area, they locate the Dodge Caliber.
Police open the car to find a crumpled Santa suit. Inside are hundreds of rounds of ammunition hooked to a flare. The police realize this is a booby trap.
The bomb squad arrives and immediately clears the streets. As they work to disarm the device, they trip a wire, triggering an explosion.
Black powder blows, flames are everywhere, and bullets are going off. No one is hurt in the blast, but the car is completely destroyed, as well as any evidence that might have been inside.
Glendale police receive a call from a concerned citizen about a suspicious RAV4 parked in his neighborhood. When police run the plate, they trace it to a rental contract under the name of Bruce Pardo. Covina detectives rush to the scene. It's loaded with supplies for an extended road trip. But what is Pardo's getaway car doing in this quiet Glendale neighborhood, 14 miles from where he died?
After a quick canvass of the neighborhood, detectives learned that the RAV4 was parked about 500 feet from Scott Nord's house. Scott Nord is Sylvia Ortega's divorce attorney.
Now, it appears that Bruce Pardo planned to kill Nord. When detectives sit down with him, he is able to provide insight into what might have driven a man with no police record or history of violence to snap. Police also want to know how the fire at the Ortega home started. Plus, how after planning an elaborate getaway, did Bruce Pardo end up shot dead in his brother's apartment? Coming up, when Bruce Pardo cannot save his marriage, he concocts a meticulous plot of revenge. Police locate Pardo's getaway car packed with supplies near the home of Scott Nord, Sylvia's divorce lawyer. Nord tells police what may have pushed Pardo to snap.
In January of 2001, Bruce is living with his girlfriend Elena and their 13-month-old son Matthew.
One day, when Elena goes grocery shopping, she leaves Matthew at home with Bruce. While he is watching TV, Matthew manages to crawl out the patio door into the backyard and falls into the pool.
By the time Elena returns home, she finds Bruce holding Matthew in his arms, crying hysterically.
The couple rushes Matthew to a nearby hospital. Paramedics resuscitate him, and over time, he begins to stabilize.
However, the loss of oxygen to Matthew's brain has done severe damage, and pediatricians conclude that he will be mentally disabled and confined to a wheelchair for the rest of his life.
Within 6 months, the couple breaks up.
Bruce cuts ties with Elena and his son Matthew.
With his secret safely tucked away, Bruce eventually moves on with his life. In 2004, he meets Sylvia Ortega, 40 years old, a recently divorced mother of 3.
Bruce and Sylvia click, and his friends know she is just what he needs, a down-to-earth woman from a warm and welcoming family. The couple get married on January 29th, 2006.
But the promising relationship quickly deteriorates. Bruce becomes cold and distant. The couple often fights about finances.
Even though Sylvia and Bruce's marriage is disintegrating, his mother continues to grow close to her daughter-in-law. It is through that relationship that Sylvia discovers the truth about her husband's severely disabled son that he never talks about or sees.
Sylvia has 3 kids of her own, and to her, this is an unforgivable offense. She leaves Bruce in March of 2008.
On July 31st, he is fired from his job for fraudulently billing clients.
It is at this point investigators believe he set his murderous revenge plot into motion.
Pardo must be embarrassed by his personal life, including his firing and finances being on display in open court. At this point, he's even estranged from his own mother, Nancy, who sits with Sylvia's family at the divorce hearings.
By this time, he has also picked up his custom-made Santa suit, as well as obtained a compressor, 50 foot of hose, and a high-octane tank of fuel for his homemade flamethrower.
In the week before Christmas, Pardo rents a blue Dodge Caliber and a silver Toyota RAV4 from separate car rental places, then packs it with supplies he will need to flee the country.
He has followed his plan to the letter. He's ready for the grand finale. But how does he end up fatally shot hours later in his brother's apartment? Coming up, one mistake causes Bruce Pardo's plan to go awry and lead to unexpected and deadly consequences. After his wife Sylvia leaves him, Bruce Pardo methodically amasses an arsenal of weapons. He mounts a deadly plot of revenge. On Christmas Eve, Bruce leaves his home dressed in his Santa Claus suit. He strolls past his next-door neighbor. Waving hi, he tells him he is going to a Christmas party.
After dropping off the RAV4 at Scott Nord's home in Glendale, Bruce Pardo drives his Dodge Cavalier to Covina.
Armed, dangerous, and sporting a custom-made Santa Claus suit, ready to take out his rage on the family he once loved. Police who worked this case believe that Pardo had yet another intended victim.
Pardo knew his mother had been invited to the Christmas Eve party, and he intended to kill her because he felt that she had sided with his ex-wife in their divorce. Fortunate for her, she wasn't feeling well that night and stayed home.
After gunning down the Ortega family, Pardo prepares for his next step, burning the house to the ground. He returns to the entrance. He rips wrapping paper off the package he brought with him, a homemade flamethrower. Its hose and spray nozzle are connected to a canister of pressurized oxygen and high-octane racing fuel.
Bruce begins spraying a mist of gas all around the house. Inside of his Santa Claus suit, he pulls out a flare, intending to use it to ignite a fire. But Bruce Pardo makes one huge mistake. What he did not account for is that there were two fireplaces roaring at the time of the attack. The mist of gas hits the open flame and causes a fiery explosion, which quickly spreads throughout the house.
Bruce Pardo is barely able to escape. He leaps into his Dodge Caliber.
But instead of going to Scott Nord's house as planned, Bruce drives 30 miles away to his brother's home in Sylmar.
Once inside, Bruce discovers the house fire has melted large chunks of his polyester Santa suit through his clothes and onto his skin.
He has horrific third-degree burns on his hands and arms, and the pain must be unbearable.
According to Bruce Pardo's autopsy report, some unknown assailant did not shoot Bruce Pardo as police initially thought. Bruce Pardo shoots himself.
In the aftermath, an FBI behavioral assessment suggests that Pardo's behavior on that evening were sparked by extreme narcissism and his obsessive-compulsive disorder.
More than a dozen children lose one or both parents the night of the Christmas Eve massacre.